It is a brand new edition for the 5th of February, 2024 of Flyers Daily, which is presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. Flyers will return from the All-Star break coming up tomorrow night when they take on the Florida Panthers down in Florida, then return home for Winnipeg, Seattle, and Arizona. Crucial stretch of schedule. We'll discuss that and more with our Monday guest. You hear him every Monday. It's Mondays with Meltzer from NHL.com, PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. It is Bill Meltzer. Have you enjoyed the break, Bill?
I have. Every once in a while, it's nice to have a few days away. I did catch the last couple of Phantoms games and some All-Star stuff too. So, but yeah, I think the break came at an important time, for the team. Able to get some players back healthy. It sounds like Owen Tippett should be ready to go for Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then guys get banged up, and then in February, if you look at the schedule, difficulty-wise, it's a tough schedule. But in terms of number of games, it's a pretty moderate, even a light schedule. In terms of number of games, there's days off. There's only one back-to-back, so at least you should have most of your personnel available as you go in. And the Flyers, I'm not saying a cushion, but they build up a little bit of leeway for themselves. And unfortunately, you lose 5 in a row, you lose whatever leeway you had. So this is an important stretch of games coming up. Whether the team is looking to maybe sell some pieces or whatever as you get to the trade deadline, as John Terrell said, they're still looking to win hockey games, and these are some important games that they're going to still continue to play meaningful games as you get into the stretch drive.
Yeah, and you got to put a halt to this 5-game skid immediately, if not sooner, if possible. I mean, we are, 32 days away from the NHL trade deadline. Yeah. And Bill, that may be the biggest storyline of this unofficial second half of the season is what happens between now and the deadline coming up in March.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I think that they're, at a certain point in the standings, you weigh against what assets come back versus trying to hold on to the pieces, keep the chemistry in the room together, and try to take that push at a playoff spot versus, just as an example, a Steeler, what would be coming back as opposed to you're not even thinking so much in terms of being like, well, is that worth a 3rd round pick, for example, right? Then if you're out of the playoff run, you get whatever assets you can.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, if you're trying to still continue to build the standard identity, whatever you want to call it, take those next steps as a team, then you weigh that against that, and maybe you'll hang on to the guy even if you were to lose him as a free agent after the season. Walker being another example.
Yeah, I think, with a guy like Sealer, you got to look at it and you go, okay, when I get into 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, those round picks, it's, a lot of times it is a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
And your chances of hitting aren't very high. So you have to have that, that equation that you put into your head and go, is it worth it for 2.5, 3 more months of having this guy around to push for this playoff spot? Because you and I are in agreement. I know not everybody's in agreement with you and I on this, but even making the playoffs in a rebuild, having a successful season or unsuccessful season does not constitute rebuild. The moves and, strategic, direction of the team is what determines rebuild ultimately.
Oh, for sure. And the Flyers have 2 first-round picks this year, as an example.
Yep.
And obviously you could pick up yet another first-round pick that gives you all kinds of flexibility. But it's not like the Flyers are lacking assets either. The Flyers actually have some good assets and, can continue to build from there. And in some cases, too, where you have some, you want another way to bring assets in, too, especially with the cap going up, but teams wanting to stock up for a playoff run. Sometimes you can take on a salary that another team doesn't want, and maybe live with it one more year, whatever the case might be. So it's not always selling off pieces as a way. You have different ways of bringing assets in too. So, I think the Flyers will explore every possible way of doing that without necessarily just going into fire sale mode.
Yeah, it's one of the kind of overused saying in sports, but I'm going to use it: the weaponization of cap space.
Yeah.
In the league where the cap is beginning to rise again, but you can still use it as a weapon because we're under the flat cap essentially still this year for the most part. Bill, in yesterday's episode, I kind of went through the knowns that I have with this team. Again, known with relative certainty based on what we've seen recently and, other, key pieces of data. And I went through the unknowns. The list of knowns was longer than the unknowns, but the unknowns are of pretty big importance on whether this team through the next 32 games is going to be punching a ticket to the NHL postseason. I mentioned in that episode too, the first round of the playoffs, when you're not in it, you watch it, you're just like, oh my God, this is insane. It's so crazy. The games are crazy. The speed, the tenacity, the everything about the playoffs looks so different than the regular season that it makes you go, I cannot wait to get back there. But for this team to do that, they've got to overcome some pretty big unknowns.
Yeah.
That's goaltending, whether that's what happens at the trade deadline, whether that's Noah Cates, who's got 5 points in 28 games this season. There's some really big unknowns that are going to need to be answered in the positive side for them to be able to secure this playoff position. It's by no means a foregone conclusion.
No, so certainly not. And I mean, there were big things that were almost in a way a negative knowns, like the power play, which more recently moved towards maybe an unknown. Maybe they can continue some of because if you look since Christmas, they're at about 18% on the power play since the Christmas break. I mean, not great, not earth shattering, but enough to help you win some games sometimes.
Light years better than it was.
Way better, way better. I mean, one stretch ahead. I think now the last couple of games, in heading into the break, were really not good in pretty much anyway. But but they had, I think, 8 games out of 10 they got a power play goal. That's something to build off of.
Yeah.
Obviously, other things are not such positives. Like how many times were we saying prior to the whole Carter Hart situation that, hey, we know that whoever's in goal, you're going to be competitive on a night in and night out basis.
Yeah.
Now, in February, you only have one back to back. Hopefully they can give Sam Ersson a chance to give them a chance, because sometimes over these last 5 games, there have been situations, the Boston game, where they didn't give their goalie a chance to give them a chance.
Yeah.
So that's something too that that has to be has to work its way through. But obviously the goaltending, because when you're getting the schedule will get busy again in March, and you're playing a lot of divisional games, and that's something too. If you're gonna hang in this race, you're gonna need that. Every team needs the goaltending. It seems that the Flyers are inclined to maybe some combination of Peterson and maybe Sandstrom. And Sandstrom had a really good game against Hershey the other night. I know it's one game, but that's the best team in the American League. He really looked like it was one of the best games the Phantoms have had. The Flyers are going to need some pretty good games in net from either Peterson or Sandstrom, or maybe if they were to bring in a piece. But you will need that. You're going to need both goalies. So that to me obviously is the number one thing.
Yeah, Bill, in the month of March, I think they have 15 games in 30 days. Yeah. You cannot play one goalie 15 games in 30 days and expect to survive it and expect him to be able to turn in quality starter. In today's game, you have to have 2 goaltenders that can give you quality starts. How concerned are you with Ersson over his last 5 appearances? One of them was only a period in that Colorado game, but he is 0-4-0 with an .826 save percentage. Part of this is going to be just mentally bouncing back for him as well, and the environment getting much better.
Yeah, in some ways it reminds me of his early starts this year, where the numbers looked awful, and he wasn't playing at his best. I actually think he's played better lately than he was there, but but a lot of it was, again, the team not giving him much of a chance to make saves. I think that you obviously are going to need him to steal some saves.
Yep.
But again, I go back to like the 2 Pasternak goals in the final game, before the break. Well, if your defenseman is used as a screen and you're used, I mean, the Flyers have run into like Kucherov, they've run into McKinnon. They run into past. I said, I mean, the top and I mean, top teams, top goal scorers, stars in the league. At times when they were turning pucks over and having breakdowns, and that's going to make any goalie look bad.
Yeah,
so
you can't do that against Hart Trophy candidates, legit
no,
Hart Trophy candidates.
No, you can, and I mean that's something that really needed a reset. So we'll see, and I mean they're going to be challenged right away. Florida's not the defending Eastern Conference champion for nothing, so they're going to be tested right off the bat.
Yeah, and Florida, the second highest points percentage in the Eastern Conference, and Bob's been good. They're looking like a team that went to the Cup final last year, and they're looking to try and punch a ticket once again. Bill, one of the other unknowns that I had was that Sean Couturier, and to some extent Cam Atkinson had a really good start to the year, went 26 without a goal, longest stretch of his career, and then has been hot leading into the break. But this is not necessarily. I don't ever bring health into these equations because it's just a variable you can't account for. But the sustainability of Sean Couturier's play, he's played just 19 minutes and 57 seconds through the first 50 games. He's played 46 of them. But the sustainability for him to compete through all 82 of a high level of play. And I think maybe a big component of that is it may turn out to be Noah Cates and his viability going forward to maybe shelter some of those minutes away from Sean Couturier, maybe some PK.
Yeah, and that's if he moves back to the middle too at some point here, which also depends on what they're doing in terms of other moves. But I mean, Cates to me is certainly an important player in there. I think part of the problem too with the Flyers, they rattled off the 5 wins in a row. Couturier missed a couple games in there, and
so did Drysdale.
and Drysdale did too. Different situations. One was an injury, one was an illness.
Yep.
I mean, Drysdale hopefully is fine by now. Couturier should be fine by now too, but those were not some of Coots' best games. If you look at those there were a couple of those games he just didn't look like himself, and he's such an important piece of the team. They need him really on his game, especially when you are going up against the McKinnons of the league. He'll be matched up head to head with them. So, I mean, he clearly is an important piece moving forward here. No one needed the break more than him.
Him and Travis Sanheim, I thought.
I mean, because all season long they've been burning the candle at both ends with him, playing him 20 minutes a night every night. And sometimes even more than that. And I get you're out to win every game. So, I'm not to fault anybody for it, but I was and remain concerned about will there be enough in the tank through the stretch drive when you get into 15 games in March?
Yeah.
And that's a critical piece. He still is the team's most important center. No question.
Bill, one of the knowns I had, all my knowns weren't necessarily positive, but this is something that I feel like I know with relative certainty. And it's really important for Tyson Foerster this final 32 games to give a little more offense. And the known that I had listed was that I know with relative certainty that Tyson Foerster needs be a little bit more selfish and shoot the puck more. Sometimes this, when young players come in, they defer to the vets. That's like hockey, part of hockey culture. I got to earn my way. I'll set guys up for now. When I get established, then I'll be a little bit more selfish. He needs to be selfish now. He needs to provide scoring, and he needs to shoot the puck
for sure. And 2 goals stand out for me. The one back in December when he had that little hot run. Actually, he had back-to-back games where he scored from the top of the left circle.
Yep.
Snipe shots from there, and when he broke out of his recent slump, he scored another one from there too. Also, the little toe drag move he pulled off against Boston, where he was on the perimeter and he moved to the inside a little bit. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, those are the kind of goals they need him to score, because he's not necessarily a net front kind of guy, right? He's a guy who needs to score from the slots, from the flank a little bit. That's really where he's dangerous. Getting himself to those scoring areas is a big thing for him. And then when he has the opportunity, not deferring and shooting, for sure.
Is that? I imagine I had mentioned it to Torts for Hockey and Hounds before, and he agreed. I imagine there's going to be some coaching, kind of pushing him to shoot more, to be more of
Yeah.
an offensive difference maker.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, so much of it is confidence too, though. When you're playing with confidence, you're more likely to pull the trigger on shots, not double clutch as much. That's cost him some goals this year too, where it looks like he'll have somewhere to shoot, and he'll take him a little bit too long, or maybe even sometimes in the American League, that extra double clutch, that extra half second might not cost you a goal. In the NHL, it will.
Bill, over the first 50 games of the season, the Flyers MVP was at the All-Star game this weekend, I think, in Travis Konechny. He hasn't gone very many times this season without ending up on the score sheet in back-to-back games. He's riding 3 games without it right now, leading into the break, though. But, if you're going to take the final 32 games and make it just its own capsule, don't consider anything that's happened so far, TK is going to be there as one of the MVPs, but I think he's got 2 guys offensively that are going to challenge him. And I think one of them is returning tomorrow night. That's Owen Tippett. And I think the other one is Joel Farabee. Are we just kind of scratching the surface with Farabee here? Because we saw his arc of development, obviously had a dip, and then he had the surgery going into that season. He played all 82. He's played all 50 again this year. And I think we're starting to see, another big ascension up in Joel Farabee's overall game. Not killing penalties right now. He's been one of the better 5-on-5 players in the entire NHL this season. But those 2 guys, I think, can challenge Konechny for an MVP of the encapsulated final 32.
For sure. Yeah, I think that, Farabee, I think, will be your Pelle Lindbergh winner this year. He should be, coming off of the injury, and and he's been remarkably consistent in his overall season. I would like to see, I'd like to see getting a couple lines going at once. Having Tippett back should help with that. And whether Tippett is playing with Couturier or whether Tippett is playing with Frost, I would like to see. I'd like to have a couple lines going at once. And if Tippett is playing with Couturier, then maybe you go Farabee, Frost, and Atkinson. Obviously, had a little bit of a surge for the All-Star break too, but getting a little bit of scoring depth going. They've had it at times, other times they haven't had it. So that to me is a bit of an unknown. What will the depth look like beyond the top line? But but in terms of the guys at the top of the list, I think your top 4, you're probably looking at the 3 guys you mentioned, Tippett, and then maybe Frost rounding out the top 5.
Bill, one of the questions that I've been seeing quite a bit and conversation lately is about Bobby Brink, who was sent down to the Phantoms.
Yeah.
And I had checked in with somebody down there in LaPierre to see how Brink was doing. And if he was taking the pseudo demotion the right way. And what I was told from Lappy was he has come down and he has just put on his work boots. He is working and he is not pouting, and he has gone down there and played a lot more minutes and produced. And some people were asking, does Bobby Brink come back after this break? I think you keep Bobby Brink there until you have some roster moves and you let him get a pretty, good sample size down there and really build up some confidence. And I mean, I don't even know that he has to return this year. I think he'll play some more games this year for the Flyers, but I don't think it's urgent.
No, I agree. Unless he completely goes crazy offensively.
Yeah.
And
you have an injury and you need an offensive player.
Yeah, exactly. He's not necessarily going to score his way back up here. Because there were the issues that John Tortorella and I guess the hockey ops staff in general had issues with, were concern over his pace of play, playing consistently to the NHL pace, and the other piece was his checking game. And he always works. To me, he's always been a player who has a a good work ethic. But if you're going to have Bobby Brink up in the NHL roster, to me, he needs power play time. If Bobby Brink is playing on your fourth line, then to me, it doesn't benefit him and it doesn't benefit the team. If he's playing your top 9, your top 6, depending on, to me, and it's really kind of, unless you have star caliber guys, your middle 6 is kind of interchangeable anyway. One line is going, the other line, hope you get going. It's rare to have both lines going at the same time. But what you call your second line, what you call your third line might vary night to night. But he needs to be playing in that middle 6 group, and he needs to be a regular on the power play. If he's not doing those things, again, maybe you're better off having someone else there, and he's playing all situations. Maybe not PK, but playing a lot of minutes in the American League, getting playing on the half wall in your first power play unit, just continuing to grow his all around game a little bit. Maybe that's where he is best suited for the rest of the season. And it's nice that he has a couple of goals, had his first assist of the season in the Hershey game, had a really nice setup play in that game. But with Brink, I don't think there's any question mark that he can produce points, especially at the American League level. It's really just bringing his all around game out a little bit more. And it's funny, Jason, because we were just talking about with Forster and the confidence, right? I mean, at one point, Brink's confidence was sky high, young players, it changes in a hurry, right? You go a few games, they end up on the video in ways that they don't want to end up on the video, and all of a sudden they start to press, right? And they're looking over their shoulder, afraid they're going to be yanked out of the lineup, and they start to play a little bit conservative sometimes too. So it becomes a bit of a cycle. I think with Brink, I'd like to see him surge back into the NHL to where there is no holding him back.
Yeah.
And continue to grow from there.
I think people forget that he played very little last year. He came off the surgery, missed a lot of the season. Look, he came in and knocked the door down, earned his way onto the roster, the opening night roster. But there's going to be peaks and there's going to be valleys when you get into the NHL. And I think he's a gamer too. Like I don't think there's any question of the guy's commitment to go to dirty areas and do what it takes. It's just he's got it. There's more maturing to his game that has to happen. Last thing for you, Bill. 32 games left. We're sitting here on the 5th of February, if you can believe it. And the Flyers are in a playoff position. They're going to have their work cut out for them to land in the playoffs. But after the last couple of years, the intensity of what's going to happen between tomorrow when the season gets back underway and when it concludes coming up on April 16th against the Washington Capitals is going to be incredibly exciting. And, you can get excited about certain things within, lost seasons, but this is different. You're battling for a chance to get into that playoff field. And whether, you're one of those people that thinks they should lose to get better or that you can get something out of this 32 games, this next block of Flyers hockey is going to be incredibly revealing, stressful at times. But I think we're going to learn a lot and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm pumped about it.
Yeah, for sure. This is where you really learn about teams and players, where you have these games that take on an almost playoff-like significance to them, where you are watching the scoreboard and you're watching the tiebreakers and all these little things that really before the All-Star break you're keeping an eye on, but you're not watching night in and night out. It becomes it becomes less game to game and more bigger pictures. Okay, what is this signifying to where the team is heading? And
coupled with the trade deadline.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's obviously the one date that as it draws closer and closer and closer, there's so much is going to be put into what happens as the deadline approaches, and even right up to deadline day, sometimes those decisions actually get made on that final day. So
we sat last year's out, Billy.
No, I know. And I mean, honestly, when you look back, sometimes you're better off pulling the trigger a little bit earlier. And I go back to JVR. I mean, remember the Flyers actually had a nice little run in December and in January, and JVR was a big part of that.
Yeah.
And you probably could have moved him then. But you're, I think, kind of banking on, okay, as you get close to the deadline, some team will want him as a rental. And what happened was all the
he got injured and struggled.
Yeah, he struggled. He struggled, and the market thinned out, right? And all the musical chairs disappeared. And then by the time you got to deadline day, any potential suitor for him was already out of the market for him. And you ended up getting nothing.
You always look at a guy like Jim Rutherford. I think it's more prudent for teams to make the move sooner anyway.
Yeah.
Because I think the longer the player, he can assimilate better and the team can come together rather than having it happen, the beginning of March to the playoffs. I think that's too short a runway to add a big piece to a team or even an ancillary piece for that matter.
No, for sure. And I mean, sometimes the ancillary piece is a little bit easier to add because when you add the big piece, then all of a sudden you're reconfiguring power play time, for example.
Mm-hmm. Like Elias Lindholm ending up in Vancouver, like that. That's going to be that. I mean, that's a pretty monumental add.
That's a very big piece coming in that will alter your chemistry a little bit. And you sort it out eventually, but you do it now with the All-Star break. There's more runway to do that, as you were just saying.
Yeah, a guy like Jim Rutherford, like fans here would love him because there's nobody that makes more moves than he does. I think when his time in Pittsburgh, he made like a trade every 5 days, calendar days, or a move. Like it was just bananas the amount of moves that he makes. Sometimes, like you've said before, the best moves are the ones you don't make. But he was a guy that liked to tinker, and he's tinkering out there in Vancouver. We'll see how that plays out as we get closer to the deadline as well. Bill, great stuff. We'll be reading your stuff on PhiladelphiaFlyers.com, NHL.com, and HockeyBuzz.com. And we'll have a game preview tomorrow as the Flyers will take on Florida tomorrow night. So join us then on a brand new episode of Flyers Daily.